If there is no soul, if there is nothing that is permanent, why are we seeking nibbana? Why are we seeking nirvana? If there is no being who is suffering, then how can we say we are suffering? I got the tutor to the Dalai Lama to admit this. Someone who fled to India with the Dalai Lama, who came across the Himalayas. Historically, we have seen that there are two forms of Buddhism. There are the original teachings of the Buddha that are found primarily in the Pali language, and then there is later Buddhism, post-Ashokan Buddhism. Ashoka being the Constantine of Buddhism. He was an emperor who lived previous in the BC era, several hundred years before Christ. He's a person who, in the same way that Constantine brought together all these different Christian schools and forced them to come together with one specific doctrine, one specific organization, etc., Ashoka did the same thing with Buddhism. It's amazing how many Buddhists themselves are not even aware of this. For that matter, just like many Christians are not aware of Constantine and what he actually did to make Christianity into a rigid dogma and system. Well, Ashoka did the same thing with Buddhism. In the original Buddhism, there are many verses and texts throughout the Pali literature in which the Buddha himself speaks about Atman. He does not deny that there is an Atman. He does use the term anatman, or in Pali, anatta, meaning that which is not Atman. It's not that we don't have an Atman, and this is where the difficulty came in philosophically, but we'll talk about that in a moment. And he actually even explains what he means by anatman, what I just said. That, this is anatman, this is not Atman. For that matter, this is not Atman, the body, the mind, etc. All those things that are in flux are not Atman. Rather, Atman is that which is permanent. So he does speak about this. There's no way around this. Many people, scholars, have written articles about this. So this is something that's known. What ended up happening was Buddhism changed, and there began to be an emphasis on the idea that because the Buddha did not go infinitely in depth into what is the nature of Atman, well, therefore, he didn't believe in it. Oh, because he would not answer questions about God. He said, no, I will not answer questions one way or the other. It came to the point where the claim was, he didn't believe in God, etc. And then you have Nagarjuna, who came about and who came up with this philosophy of shunyata, this idea of nothingness. The absolute is ultimately nothingness, shunya or shunyata. So today what we find is, yes, the vast majority of Buddhists will say to you, yes, no, we don't believe in a permanence of the soul, of Atman, yes, we don't believe in God, etc. But now this leads to the second part of what you're asking here. Wouldn't that negate any and all spiritual implications? Yes. A child can see that. If there is no soul, if there is nothing that is permanent, then why are we seeking nibbana? Why are we seeking nirvana? If there is no being who is suffering, then how can we say we are suffering? Without permanence, all of Buddhism is meaningless and falls apart philosophically. I've had this discussion with some of the greatest Buddhist leaders on earth, including Geshe Sopa. When I was in Madison, Wisconsin, I don't talk about this a lot, but I had conversations with Geshe Sopa, who was not just a professor, he was one of the personal tutors to the Dalai Lama. I met with him many times. He, of course, was a serious Buddhist. We would have these discussions, and I would push it in this direction all the time. The Buddha himself explains in his first sermon that we are in suffering. This is our problem. But really, is there suffering? Can there be suffering if there is not a sufferer? And we would go on back and forth like this. Who is achieving nirvana? Who? There is no self. There is no permanence. There is no permanent being. There is no what Patanjali would call drashtur, or experiencer. If there is no experiencer, that so-called being, that so-called sentient being is in actuality insentient, in fact, non-existent. There is no being to experience either the suffering or the joy of nirvana. That being the case, can you say that nirvana has meaning? And I would question him like this, and it got to the point where I remember the day when it happened, actually, and again, it was in his office. He very quietly kind of looked around and said, no, you're all right. You're all right. There must be There must be an experiencer. And that experiencer must always be there. Otherwise, there is no meaning to it. No, there is a person and they achieve nirvana and they must experience that nirvana, and that experience must be total and absolute and eternal. Otherwise, it has no meaning. So indeed, I got the tutor to the Dalai Lama to admit this. And for someone to be of this stature, someone who fled to India with the Dalai Lama, who came across the Himalayas, someone who was his tutor, for this person to finally come to the point of saying, yes, no, there must be a permanent self. Otherwise, Buddhism makes no sense. Yes, you're correct. Yes, that is the teaching of the Buddha, that there is a permanent self, and that permanent self is in suffering due to ignorance and must achieve liberation, nirvana. That is the teaching of the Buddha, regardless of what contemporary Buddhists say.